President Bongbong Marcos is back in the country after his trip to Belgium for the ASEAN-EU Summit. President Marcos managed to secure additional investments and defense commitments from EU partners. Now, these include a 4.7 billion peso investment from multinational consumer goods company Unilever. The Netherlands has also vowed to strengthen its defense cooperation with the Philippines. President Marcos met with Dutch Prime Minister Mark Rutte on the sidelines of the ASEAN-EU Summit. The Philippines also secured ties with Estonia over cybersecurity defense and extradition. President Marcos also discussed issues on maritime safety with French multinational company OSEA. The company plans to put up a 1.5 billion peso shipyard in the Philippines. Now, in his speech before state leaders, President Marcos called for support and cooperation in coming up with a legal framework on the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea, or UNCLOS.
Beyond declaring respect and support for UNCLOS as a legal framework that governs all activities in the oceans and seas, we need to see an effective application of the UNCLOS to address the maritime disputes and geopolitical rivalry in the Indo-Pacific, to truly realize the still distant aspiration for the Indo-Pacific to become a sea of peace and prosperity for us all.
Let's discuss these commitments from European countries with One News defense editor Manny Mogato. He joins us here live on the studio. Good evening, Manny.
Good evening, Robbie. Good evening, Gretchen.
No, ang daming pinag-usapan doon, but essentially you could all boil it down to, defense and security very high up on the agenda of President Marcos. Where do we start? What are the main features of these things that were announced?
Well, the defense cooperation basically is bilateral agreements between the Philippines and individual European countries, no? Because President Marcos met with 10 leaders of EU. EU is a 27-country organization, and he only met with 10. But overall, for the ASEAN and the EU, it's all more on investment and trade. And in fact, the EU has committed to invest 10 billion euros in the next 5 years for infrastructures in ASEAN, especially for green economy and for climate change, and which is also one of the agenda of President Marcos in Europe. Aside from green technology, investment, and trade, the Philippines is also interested in reapplying for the GSP+. But all of these are tied to human rights, no? Because it's not a blanket check for the Philippines. No? You have to comply with the human rights agenda of the EU. So the defense cooperation is basically more on the bilateral relation with the countries. Like, we are buying multi-role fighters from Sweden. No? France is opening to supply us with submarines, and a French company is opening up a shipyard here in the Philippines. And with other countries, it's more on training, counterterrorism, cybersecurity, and other forms of engagement, capacity building for our soldiers. So I'm not sure if this will include visiting forces agreement to allow these countries to joint exercises in the Philippines. But we only have 2 BFAs with Australia and the US.
Yes.
The others could be given their time to exercise with us if President Marcos would issue an executive order. Because right now, Canada is waiting for President Marcos to sign an executive order that will allow them to participate in Balikatan, in Kamandag, in Sama-Sama, in other exercises, because they have been here only as observers. So for the European countries, I think France, UK, the Netherlands already have a logistics agreement with the Philippines. So they want to expand.
Siguro ang pinakakatanungan ng mga tao rito, I mean, when it comes to those ties, specifically with the US, with the China, is will they come to our rescue if we get attacked, if our seas get conquered?
It's not automatic. It's not automatic. Even if we had mutual defense treaty with the Americans, they have to request permission from the U.S. Congress if they can come in and help us in our defense. But the U.S. State Department has already said that they will help the Philippines protect its sovereignty and its territorial integrity. And Canada, which has unveiled its Indo-Pacific strategy this month, they said that they will be spending $2.3 billion, Canadian dollars, and they said that they will help patrol the Philippine borders and stop coercive countries, countries with bullying smaller countries like the Philippines. So let's hope that they will come into our aid.
Because we did see an incident on the news today about debris and bullying on the West Philippine Sea.
Well,
Quote unquote.
it's not an aggressive action, no? Like an attack on a ship or an attack on an island that we occupy, no? So I don't think that the MDT can be applied. But the activities of China has been increasing, and you heard, you've seen the photos issued by the Westcom today. There's about 12 ships in Sabina Shoal and in the Reed Bank area. And this is very close to Palawan, because Mischief is about 185 nautical miles, but Sabina Shoal is only 126 miles. And another island is it's much closer to Palawan, it's the Reed Bank. So they're moving closer and closer, and maybe China is expanding the territory to deny our position of fishing rights.
Okay.
Yeah.
So balik tayo dun sa trade elements that you mentioned. You mentioned GSP Plus and these trade agreements with the EU as a whole tied to human rights as well. If all of this come to pass at mamuo lahat na tong mga agreements na to, is this in effect a vote of confidence on the direction and the character of this administration, certainly relative to the last administration?
Well, some diplomats from the West, Europe, US, and Canada, were quite happy with the new government under President Marcos. They've been seeing changes because in the past 6 years, we've been isolated because of the drug war of former President Rodrigo Duterte. But they have been seeing changes, like we have 2 convictions of police officers recently, and I think the West is waiting for when former Senator Laila de Lima will be released, because that's also one of their main issues. And at the same time, they wanted some laws to be passed, like the SOGI bill, the divorce law, and to decriminalize libel. So these are the changes they're still waiting, but they said that 6 months is still a short time for Marcos to institute reforms and changes. So they're still waiting. Hopefully, these changes can occur within 1 year, and maybe we can get a vote of confidence in the West.
Okay. Maraming salamat, Manny Mugato.
Thank you.
One News Defense Chief.